Hey y'all! Welcome! My name is 𝗕𝗏 𝗦𝗏𝗲 and I am the teacher author behind 𝗙𝗪𝗲𝗲 Today I'm going to be talking about a question that I get asked very frequently, and that is, 𝗕𝗏, I have to use a district provided curriculum. How do I use my curriculum and teach guided math at the same time? And so this is a big misconception that teachers have. And if I'm being honest, I probably used to think that too, because I used to think that, I'm going to try to teach in small groups. I have my teacher workbook out in front of me and I have to follow this scripted lesson and I don't know what else to do. I probably thought that I had to teach that way once upon a time. But guys, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, and it's something that took me a while to learn, and it's a misconception that I had, but then once I figured it out, it was like a light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, okay. Guided math is not a curriculum. It's a framework for how you structure your math block with your curriculum. And it focuses on a gradual release method where learning primarily moves from teacher-led to student-led. And so real quickly, I am going to recap the 5 components of guided math if you are not familiar with them. First one is a quick warm-up, no more than 5 minutes, followed by a whole group lesson. This would be anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. Followed by independent practice, which would be anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And then the rest of the time is split between small groups at the teacher table and your math station. So today I'm going to share, hopefully, some helpful tips that can help you use the guided math format no matter what kind of curriculum that you may use. So before we talk about curriculum for a second, my first tip would be that you need to create a schedule for your math block that meets the needs of your kids. And so what I mean by that is you need to make sure that when you schedule out your math block, that you want it to set up smoothly for transitions in this style of teaching. You are not going to be primarily teaching up at the whiteboard and then your students are sitting at their desk. Again, we are with guided math, you are shifting the responsibility from teacher-led instruction to student-led instruction. And so when creating your schedule, my best tip and advice is going to be flexible. So it doesn't matter if you have a 60-minute math block, a 90-minute math block, a 30-minute math block. There are some things that you need to consider. So the first one is obviously how many minutes do you have for teaching math? Are those minutes flexible? Does your district set or create your schedule, or is that something that you can create on your own? Then think about, ideally, in a perfect scenario, how many groups would you like to see each day? And then how much time would you have for a whole group lesson? And so on. So you want to create a schedule that works best for you. And I actually have a blog post link that shares lots of different examples with you guys. So if you're interested in checking out some example schedules, you can click on the link in the description. This is something that I also teach in depth inside of Managing Math Stations, which I'll tell you a little bit more about here in just a few minutes. Okay, so tip number 1 is to first create your math block, create a schedule that is going to meet the needs of this particular teaching style. Then when it comes to using a curriculum with the guided math format, it doesn't matter if you are using a district provided curriculum, so maybe you use something like Envision or Go Math. Maybe you're using supplemental resources such as even my guided math curriculum. You do not want to over plan. I have been there before where I'm going to use the only district curriculum that I have ever used before has been Go Math. And it's been several years since I've used it, so it could have changed since then. But in years past, so with Go Math, each day you had, it was like a daily like introduction video, and sometimes those videos were long, sometimes they were short. Then there was like an interactive whiteboard activity that went along with the video. Then you had guided practice in the student workbook where you were supposed to do part of the workbook page with the kids. Then they had the independent practice page that they were supposed to do independently in their workbook, and so on. So then like there might be like a hands-on lesson or something like that. There were all of these different components, and it would be very overwhelming. Like there's no way that you can do all of those things in, let's say, I'm going to say a 20-minute time span, because during that 20-minute time span, that's kind of your ideal whole group lesson time. And you want your core teaching to take place at the small group table, not in your whole group lesson. So you don't have to do every single component. One thing I share, inside of managing math stations is that when you are planning out your lessons, it doesn't matter if you are using a district mandated curriculum or if you're using supplemental resources. Do not plan to show a video and then you're going to do this hands-on lesson with manipulatives, and then you're going to do an interactive notebook page, and then you're going to do a craft, and then they're going to do a workbook. You don't have time for all of that. You cannot do it all. So if you are required to use a provided curriculum, or you're using supplemental resources, look at the components of that day's lesson. Do you really need to do everything? No. Pick one or two lessons or activities and then go from there. Think about what is the most important and what can be done during the time frame that you created in your math schedule. So for example, let's say you're using a district mandated curriculum and each day they have a daily video that you are required to show. So maybe you do the video as your whole group lesson. And then for independent practice, maybe you have them do part of a workbook page if you're required to use a workbook. Or maybe you do part of the teacher guided lesson from your curriculum during that independent practice time. Maybe you do one or two examples with them and then have them do 2 or 3 examples on their own. And then during your small group time, that is when you are going to reinforce the content that they learned in the video that they watched that day. And so then you can either supplement and use other resources that go along with your district curriculum, or if your curriculum provides materials for you to use, then you can use them there at your small group table. And then I often get asked, well, we're required to use student workbooks. Like, when do I fit that in? And so you can either use your workbooks during your independent practice time. I had never done this, but there are lots of teachers inside managing math stations that, because their curriculum workbook is required, so what they do is that they make their workbook a station. So it's one of the rotations that they rotate throughout the week. And so then they might have 1 or 2 stations as like a hands-on activity, and then maybe their third station rotation is going to be their workbook, and then they have to complete those workbook pages just because it's a district requirement. So there are several ways that you can kind of squeeze it in, but remember that you want to pick and choose what you think is best for your kids. You do not have to do it all. And then the third tip I have is that a big factor, with guided math instruction is that it allows you to differentiate to meet the needs of all of your students. And so even if your curriculum doesn't provide you with differentiated materials, this part doesn't have to be hard. So let's say, for example, you are working on addition and subtraction with regrouping. And so that's the skill that your curriculum is having you teach. So maybe to reinforce that, to differentiate, it can be just as simple as, instead of using 2 dice to create your numbers, Maybe you use 3 dice, or they roll 4 dice to create a 4-digit number. Maybe you have students roll a 2-digit number and a single-digit number. Maybe they are practicing rolling a 3-digit number and a 2-digit number. Differentiation doesn't have to be as hard as it sounds. You can easily change up and differentiate your materials and your activities just by using simple things such as manipulatives. Problem solving is another thing that is easily differentiated. So I just know whenever I taught Go Math, back then in our practice workbook pages, no matter if it was the guided practice part or the independent practice part, there were all kinds of word problems. It was very problem solving heavy, and that's a whole different live in itself, but that problem solving can easily be differentiated. So you can change out the numbers so that different groups of students, they're working on the same problem, but with different numbers. So they're all working on the same thing, but just at a different level. And so you can easily change out your numbers, even if it's in a workbook. You might have to have certain groups of kids color over a number with a permanent marker, and you go in and you change out the number, or you tell them what number you want them to write. So that's something that can easily be changed. And so students, they can easily work on a skill using the same activity, but on a different level. So I'm going to give you one more example. Let's think about place value for a second. Maybe your students are working on the same activity, or in their workbook, let's say it's a workbook page and it just shows a set of base 10 blocks. And maybe in the workbook page, they just have to write the number form of the base 10 blocks that are shown. So you can easily you can easily differentiate this. And so maybe group number 1, maybe they are only identifying the base 10 form in number form. Then maybe group 2, they're going to go in, and even though the directions on the work page say write it in number form, then you might tell them, hey, I want you to write the number and I want you to expand it. Group 3, they might have to look at that set of base 10 blocks, and then they have to recreate it 4 different ways. So just because a worksheet has a set of instructions doesn't mean that you as the teacher can't change those instructions to differentiate it for all of your students. You want to prioritize your lessons based on what kids need the most, not what your curriculum workbook tells you to do. I said it. You have my permission. I'm going to say that one more time. You want to prioritize your lessons based on what kids need and not what your curriculum workbook tells you to do. If you are looking to get started with guided math, maybe you have no idea where to start. You are looking for more tips with differentiation. You're looking for more ideas on how to integrate your curriculum. You need help setting up your math block, collecting data, all the things with managing all 5 of those components that I mentioned earlier. I would highly recommend that you check out Managing Math Stations. Managing Math Stations is my online self-paced professional development program that walks you through step by step on how to implement guided math into your day. If you have any questions at all, as always, leave me a comment, and I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you guys have a blessed one. Bye.